Same old man. Game over.
You're gonna need a big approach.
Why so serious?
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 556 for October 16th, 2023. And I am JD Duran. And if you follow us on social media, you may have seen that over the weekend, my lovely co-host Brendan Cassidy got married to his lovely bride. I was in Philadelphia to see it myself in person. It was the first time I've seen Brendan in person in probably 8 years, as we joked about last week on the show. It's been quite a while, but it was a great time. However, with all of the shenanigans of the weekend, and of course he's spending time with his lovely bride this week, so he is not here. Joining me instead is our lovely editor-in-chief, friend of the show, the lovely, the great Dave Giannini. Dave, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you. It's good to be back here now that you have all this technology running.
Yeah.
You got video. You got, I mean, I don't know what people can see. You got these like banners up. Like it's very professional.
We're trying.
You're moving on up, man. It's
good.
Good.
It's a new year. We crossed the 10-year threshold. We figured let's make some changes. Let's up the ante a little bit. And we've moved into the video space. It's been a lot of fun. Hopefully people are enjoying it. And of course, we still got a lot of people in the podcast sphere as well, but hopefully there's some crossover. And if you don't want to listen to the entire podcast on YouTube, we do put up clips of the segments that we do. So you can also watch it in more attainable chunks if you would rather do that. But either way, we hope people subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/InSessionFilm. But yes, Dave, it's great to not only talk to you, hear your lovely voice, but to get to see your face. We all get to see you now.
That's right.
Awesome.
No more secrets.
No more secrets.
This is me. Damn it.
There's Dave out in the universe. I really do appreciate you filling in for Brendan this week. It's going to be a lot of fun. And to get Dave onto the show, I knew I needed some bait. And I threw out there on the hook a little Martin Scorsese, and it reeled him right in. So,
yeah. I'm an easy mark when it comes to that. You're like, you want to do the show? And I was like, I don't know, man. I'm really busy sleeping. It's late night.
Yeah.
It's like we're doing a Scorsese episode. Like, damn, I'm in.
I'm in.
And I did just
No.
want to say, like, Brendan and I have had a merry war of words for many years at this point, which is a crazy thing to say, but I genuinely just want to say congratulations, Brendan. Very, very happy for you. It's okay that you copied me and got married after me. It's fine. But congrats, man. I'm super happy for you. Saw the pictures. You look very happy. Bride looks beautiful. Fantastic. Real happy for you, man.
Absolutely. Huge congratulations to Brendan. It was a thrill to see him. And yes, I have never seen him more giddy. He absolutely had the time of his life. So
nice.
Glad that he's getting to spend time with his lovely bride. However, he will be back next week. They're not leaving for their honeymoon for another couple weeks, I believe. So Brendan will be back sooner rather than later. Good. Then he'll take another leave as he goes on his honeymoon, which means we'll get to see more of Dave in the meantime as well.
We'll see. Let's not... I haven't signed any contracts.
That is true.
We'll see how this one goes. Really. Yeah, maybe you'll
find
get
more bait.
Maybe you'll get like really negative reactions to this. So like, get that guy off my screen. I cannot deal. It's possible.
Well, that would only be the case if we were to talk about Disney and maybe animated movies.
Well,
who knows?
Yeah, maybe that'll be the next episode. That'll be great. I'll just be in here just like frothing at the mouth, spitting and cursing. It'll be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, I mean, we had some Disney episodes earlier in the year with Ryan and Jay, and they were pretty heated. A little controversial, polarizing.
Well, I mean, I think that's a Ryan and Jay thing. That all track, like if you're gonna get people to yell and scream at each other over picture books that are moving on screen, then like those are the people to bring in.
Exactly. The experts, Ryan and Jay. Yes,
for sure.
absolutely.
Yes. Children.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe that'll be for the next episode with Dave. However, we will be talking about Martin Scorsese, as everyone is aware of. He has a new film coming out this weekend, The Killers of the Flower Moon, which is getting great praise on the festival circuit. And I'm, of course, as is Dave and everyone else, very excited to see that this weekend when it comes out in theater. So we'll talk about Martin Scorsese. We'll look back at his career, talk about our favorite Scorsese movies, do a little retrospective, if you will. However, before we get to that, a couple of notes. Earlier over the weekend, was it over the weekend? I think it was announced that Michael Caine is retiring from acting at the age of 90. What a time to retire.
Yeah.
Age 90.
No kidding. That's how you know you're doing your career right. When you can, I mean, how many people can work till 90 and get to go, yeah, I think
maybe now's the time.
I think I'll hang it up. You're working in a factory. You're not going to make it to 90.
Yeah, exactly.
God bless being an actor. That's really the way to go.
Absolutely. No, I work in an office setting where I'm at a computer for 8 hours a day. If I have to do that at the age of 90, I just don't think I'm going to survive.
No, not with my mental health intact. Absolutely.
Exactly. But God bless Michael Caine, retiring at such a ripe age. So let's start with Michael Caine. First of all, I guess a happy retirement to Michael Caine. The man's been nominated 6 times for Oscars, I believe, over the last 6 decades or so. What do you think about Michael Caine as an actor? What are some of your favorite performances, Dave?
It's so strange. I was thinking about this because obviously, like, not a lot of time to prepare for this because this just happened. It's just announced. Michael Caine, for me, is one of those actors that's interesting because he's just always been there. Like for my entire life. Like I was born in 1979 and he has been in the public eye and in a number of different ways. Like if you look at his older stuff, like he was the suave, debonair, sexy, and in some cases action star. And then, you see him later in his career in kind of the Christopher Nolan era. And then you had him these little comedy bits here and there and like the Austin Powers franchise, like, and of course, one of the first things, sadly, that I think of is I'm trying to remember the name of that movie. I think it was on Netflix, the Trip or whatever, where they did the battling Michael Caine.
The Trip, yeah.
And it is interesting for an actor who is so talented and so amazing to almost just like kind of a Christopher Walken, kind of become a caricature of himself, and not through any fault of his own. Not like he's taking a bunch of roles that are garbage, but like he's just got a certain cadence and a certain way he speaks. You just like you could hear Michael Caine say one line in a movie, and you'd like your ears would immediately go to that and be like, oh, I know that's Michael Caine immediately.
Exactly.
But he's one of those actors that immediately brings a sense of gravitas to a movie. Like he's there and you're going to listen, whether you want to or not, whether you're talking about in things like in Inception. If you're, but then, there's periods in his career where, God bless him, he was like, I would like a vacation. So I'm going to be in a Jaws sequel, like very famous. I don't think apocryphal story that he was like, they'd say, why'd you agree to this movie? This is terrible. And he was like, do you see where it's filming? It's in paradise. Like, and I there's a part of me who, of course, sees film and acting as an art form that in most cases I think would bristle at that. But I also kind of respect it, man. Like if you could swing that, if you could be like, you're going to pay me to go on vacation. That's the dream.
Absolutely.
That's absolutely the dream. And I remember like seeing him as a young actor for the first time and not doing that thing where I'm going to go back and watch all of his movies, because who has the time to watch all of Michael Caine's movies? That would take forever. But I remember seeing the remake of Alfie and not realizing it was a remake at that point, and then doing some research of it, like, oh, Michael Caine, like old guy Michael Caine, that guy was in it. So I went back and watched that, and then watched The Italian Job, and there's like just kind of an amazing treasure trove of British focused cinema that a lot of people, especially for your like younger viewers and listeners, probably have no idea even exists, because you just see Michael Caine as, you know, as the old statesman, right?
Yeah.
The guy who comes and gives heart to your movie without even trying, like showing up as Alfred in the Dark Knight movies and just breaking your heart just at a moment's notice. You're like not ready for it, and you just, it gives you this oomph that a lot of actors don't have the ability to do. And then you go back and you see this like suave guy, and you're like, it doesn't even fit in my brain. It's so interesting when you see these long careers where you're like, wow, so many opportunities to do so many different things. And he really took advantage. He seemed like he was always having a really good time as an actor.
Yeah, I completely agree. I echo everything that you just laid out there. He has such a magnetic presence on screen, has that distinctive voice. And that's what makes him so unique when it comes to popular culture, because yes, from a film perspective, we could talk about his performances and his artistic craft. Also, every comedian on the planet has a Michael Caine impersonation. Like every one of them. You know, you talked about the Trip movies as one example. So he's certainly in the zeitgeist in many different forms. But yeah, when it comes to his film acting career, I do love how eclectic it is. You talk about some of his more award-winning or nominated performances. And as I mentioned, he was nominated, I believe, 5 or 6 different times for Alfie, the aforementioned Alfie, for Educating Rita. And then he won for Hannah and Her Sisters and The Cider House Rules, I believe, for supporting actor.
I really like that first one, but then Cider House Rules.
Yeah. And then The Quiet American, which actually caught up with somewhat recently because we did our 2002 retrospective last year. And he's really good in that film. So, so he's been nominated several different times over the years, 6 different times now that I'm looking at it here.
Should have been nominated for Children of Men. That's the, you want to talk eclectic performances, that he really goes for broke in that movie. And
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's an argument to be made too. I believe our own Joey Gentili brought this up on Twitter over the weekend as well, that he arguably could have been nominated for Youth in 2015. It was a really small film, but he's really great in that movie. And that means he would have been nominated in every decade since the 60s.
That's wild.
Which is crazy to think about.
What a career. Like that. I mean, I shudder to ever agree with Joey at any point, but I wouldn't have been mad at that. Like that. I don't think if I had the vote, I would have nominated that, but it's a good performance in a overblown, not great movie. But he's good in it. You can only work with what you're given, and he does a wonderful job in that movie. Well, and that's the thing about Michael Caine. He always does. Even in ridiculous roles. Like I never saw a film where it felt like he was phoning it in. And that is becoming increasingly rare. And when you talk about a career that spans 50 years or whatever, it's like, that's incredible just on its own.
Absolutely. And again, as we've been talking about, it's fascinating, the filmography here, because he has some roles that are Oscar worthy and films that would be in the awards conversation, but
like Nomeo and Juliet, like that.
Exactly. You know, but then he's also in King of Thieves and Kingsman: The Secret Service.
Oh boy, good gracious.
You know, like I just love that, you know, to your point earlier, sometimes you just got to have a little bit of fun. And those are some of the roles that he's willing to pick. But
I'm going to blow your mind right now, JD. You know what I think low key is maybe my favorite role of Michael Caine?
Okay.
Muppet Christmas Carol.
I was just going to bring that up because that is my favorite.
It is the best performance of Ebenezer Scrooge on film. Better than George C. Scott, better than Alistair Sim. It's perfect. It is a perfect performance. And like, you know that I have made a online career of talking trash about children's media, but I challenge you to come to that movie with an open mind and not be moved.
Yeah.
Good luck. And it's so much is because of his performance. He never treats that role like it's silly.
I agree.
Like Charles Grodin, who's fun in the Muppet movie, he's treating it like it's a joke, like it's over the top and silly. Caine never does that. He plays it like he is playing Ebenezer Scrooge on a stage on Broadway. Like he is just in for a penny, in for a pound, and just goes for it. And it is a movie I watch pretty much every Christmas. And I kind of never get tired of his arc in that movie. And that's an arc everyone knows. Like, we know where it's going. It's not a surprise. We've all read The Christmas Carol or seen 19 different versions of it. And yet that one just, it really works.
Completely with you. Absolutely with you. I don't know what was up for Oscars in 1992 when it comes to acting.
I guarantee you nothing was as good as that.
I was going to say, like, I think he should have, because it is.
I mean, I'd have to look. I'm sure there are great performances there, but like,
but that's worthy.
Really
that's
good.
a worthy performance.
I agree.
And one of the best Muppet movies as well. And you're right. He brings a sincerity to the role that perhaps it's at contrast with the affable humor of it. But that's such a distinct movie. It's a distinct version of that story that I really love. And he's really great in it. I mean, we can argue all day, I guess, as to what is his best performance. I would still argue that is in the conversation. And at any rate, it's my favorite Michael Caine. That's the one I really wanted to highlight here.
It's wonderful. I mean, and like, he is one of those actors that he's so good and so himself and so sincere and genuine in every role that, like, it is an undersold skill in Hollywood or wherever you're making movies, if we're making movies anymore someday, if the strike ever ends, if we actually ever make movies again. But watchability. He is just inherently watchable. Even in movies that are dated and feel slow and kind of a slog to me, my eye is still drawn to him. And I'm like, he's going to do something that's going to catch my attention. And he's just got that. He's got that movie star quality. And he has from, his 20s to his 80s. Like, he is at that entire time. And that is impressive. And, God bless Christopher Nolan for like realizing how great Michael Caine is. And he's just like, I'm just going to make you the heart of all of my movies. I'm going to make you carry the emotions. So, poor Christian Bale can lose weight and gain weight and do whatever he needs to do. And you can do the real heavy lifting. Just get Michael Caine.
Absolutely. Rule. And our generation probably will think of him first and foremost in his Nolan era.
Sure.
And not just Batman. And he's really great in the Batman films.
Sure.
However, I think of something like The Prestige. He's phenomenal in The Prestige. That might be his best work in a Nolan film.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, but although I think he does so much with so little in Inception.
I agree.
Actually, just recently rewatched that because my wife had never seen it, and I was flabbergasted by this, and I was like, sit down. We're gonna watch this movie, and she liked it. She enjoyed it. Good. It was definitely one of those like, man, I wish I'd seen that in the theater. And I was like, yeah, it is a big screen experience. Yes, just like every Christopher Nolan movie, I guess, at this point.
Absolutely, yeah. Christopher Nolan makes movies that, like another director we'll talk about, it isn't Marvel, somehow does well. It's amazing how that works.
Yep, because it's not just content. But we'll get there.
Exactly. That is a conversation that I don't think will ever die.
No. That will outlive Martin Scorsese 100%.
No doubt about it. And Christopher Nolan and all the rest. But Michael Caine, one of the best. And happy retirement.
Indeed.
Definitely go and check out some of his films if you haven't seen it. Also, like some of his older work too. Like I kind of, this might be blasphemy, but I kind of like the remake of The Italian Job better than Michael Caine's version. But
it's of its time for sure.
It is.
Yeah.
But to your point, he's magnetic. He carries that movie, has a charisma and a persona that is mesmerizing. I do love him in that movie, despite me being a little mixed on the movie itself. Alfie, very good as well. Or I think of something like Dressed to Kill. Say what you will about Brian De Palma, but I think he's terrific.
Brian
in that
De Palma
movie.
rules.
Yeah, I love De Palma as well. And I really like that movie, and he's absolutely mesmerizing that as well. So
Another one, just one more to watch. 1971, Get Carter. Fantastic action flick. They remade it, and he had a small role in I think it was in 2000, the one that they remade. And I liked that they gave him a small role, but I ended up going back and watching the one from 71, and that one still works. I think pacing wise, I think it works a little better maybe than the original Italian Job does. And the original Italian Job, I mean, it doesn't have Charlize Theron. So what are we doing here?
Yeah, exactly. But yes, Michael Caine, God love him. Hopefully he lives another 20 years.
Yes. Cheers, Michael Caine. Retirement.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk about A24, everyone's favorite studio, especially when it comes to horror. There's no divisiveness at all.
I mean, it's nice that horror finally exists now that A24 is
exactly.
Here. I mean,
it's amazing.
Yeah, it's nice that they invented that genre. That's good. Oh no, that's elevated horror. Sorry.
Oh my gosh. One of the dumbest conversations I have ever seen. Aside from the Martin Scorsese nonsense, which needs to stop.
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Aside from that,
the brakes.
I think the A24 horror elevated thing is the most grating discourse for me, aside from Scorsese. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, it's interesting because I kind of see where people are coming from when they talk about this stuff, because there are, just like every genre, there are lots of subgenres. Right. Mm-hmm. And there are some horror movies that have no interest in being what the general public would call a quality film. Like, they're interested in the blood, in the gore, in the slasher aspect, and that's fine. And that works. And it gets to be made on the cheap and make a bunch of money, and you get to have fun with it. And then there's some horror movies that want to be more than that. But that shouldn't negate the artistry of the horror made on the cheap. Right. I mean, I think the original Halloween is one of the best 25 movies ever made.
It's great.
End of sentence.
I agree.
And that was made for like $9 in pocket and change in the couch. I mean, it was nothing. They made it for nothing. And yet it still works. And it's interesting that if that movie gets made now, it might be seen as elevated horror. It might be in that category, which is very strange to think about.
It is weird to think about. Yeah.
Yeah. But it also, I get from the horror community why this would be a kind of offensive, though, is it's like saying everything else you love is the opposite of elevated. It's down below the earth, and it's terrible, and it shouldn't be seen. And every time a horror, and the other kind of knife to the ribs to that community is every time a horror movie is good and does well, we got to call it something else. That's not a horror movie. That's a psychological thriller. Right. And it's like, so when you say things like, horror movies never get nominated for Oscars, not true. Silence of the Lambs is 100% a horror movie. That is a horror movie. Like, he literally wears someone's face on his face. Like, that's as horror as you get, bro. Like, that's what are we talking about?
You're not wrong.
So
you're not wrong.
So I get why they would be upset by that, but I also get the need for a kind of crowbar separation between things to kind of, but the way it's done, the way it's talked about is pretty annoying, is a nice way to put it.
Yeah, I think the problem with it, to me, it's twofold. And additionally to what you're saying, because I do agree with everything that you're talking about there.
You're so smart. That's good.
I know.
Yes.
Exactly. I'm going to say that a lot on this episode. All joking aside, though, I think it is born out of two things, or at least there's two sides of this equation that I find striking. I think some of this is born out of horror in the 2000s I do think became a little stale.
Yes.
For a lot of people. So when the 2010s come around and it becomes a new thing, people found it invigorating.
Sure.
And so then that's where the whole elevated thing comes from, that because it to me, I think it is less the kind of horror film. It partially is that, of course, because the A24 horror films do bring a different energy, especially given what the 2010 or what the 2000s were in terms of horror. But I think it was that jarring turn. That's what had people trying to figure out what this is. And that's the term that was born out of it.
Sure.
I don't know if it was intended to be derogatory to other types of horror films. I don't know. But I do think that distinction ended up spurring on debate that ended up being this larger conversation that is entirely grating.
Yes.
So that's
sure.
part of it. The other thing about it that I find interesting, frustrating, dumb is that
I like this version of JD. Keep going. Yes. Get them.
Okay, so these movies have been criticized for, again, being thoughtful, different, however you want to call it, as far as what A24 is doing. It's weird to me that we've only done this. We've only done this with horror. Mm-hmm. That is the only genre where this conversation specifically has taken place, at least in our day. Mm-hmm. We do not do this with drama.
No.
There are slight, hollow, superficial dramas that come out all the time. And guess what? When Nomadland came out, no one was like, this is elevated drama. The Power of the Dog is elevated drama. Past Lives, elevated drama. Like, no one says that.
Right.
So,
right.
like, why are we criticizing? And, like, to me, I think that's where it becomes a little bit twofold as well, because we're criticizing these films for simply existing a certain way when The Witch was being made or when Hereditary was being made. They were not being made in spite of the superficial slashers that people love. That was never on the mind of Robert Eggers or Ari Aster or whoever.
Right.
Like, they're just making a type of film that they love. And then people took that as some sort of offensive middle finger to the slashers that what are they doing? I cannot believe Hereditary is attacking my slasher movie.
Right.
No, what are we doing? Like, the two things have nothing in common.
Yeah, and I think this is a case of what catches on and what doesn't. Because I'll very, very mildly disagree with you in the fact that I think there is quote unquote elevated drama. We just call it art house cinema. But
there's no debate around it, is what I mean. Like,
and I think because the name is not comparison based. Right? It's not saying like drama but good, which essentially is what elevated horror is saying. I mean, that's I don't know who originally coined that, but I want to find them and hurt them.
Yeah, it's so
there's
dumb.
so much of my life that has been wasted hearing this, discussing this, seeing this on Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it now, and just like, oh God, here we go again. Like, I just can't. And I think a lot of it is the name that was chosen. It is very clearly a comparison based name. Like, there is art house cinema, there's no term for it, but there's this idea of like, it's an action movie, but no, it's really good. Whether it's like Die Hard or John Wick or, whatever your action film of choice is, there is that kind of like, it's that, but good, but we didn't come up with a catchy name. And that was the worst part, was the catchy name. And then everyone went back and forth. And it's just like, I just stop. And I like quote unquote elevated horror. I like The Babadook. I like Hereditary. Like, I like these movies, and but I also like The Driller Killer and Halloween, and like, I like those too.
I agree.
And we can have it all. It's
exactly.
fun.
And I don't think A24 is against it either. Part of this discussion, the reason we're bringing up A24 in the first place is because of the recent news that they were going after IP because their existing model, which we've known this forever, was never going to be sustainable. They lost $50 million on Beau is Afraid, a movie that was never going to make $50 million. But those
I just
are the
wish
kind
they
of
didn't
movies,
even make it at all. Just give me the $50 million.
Oh, I love it. I'm so glad it exists.
I'm like the lack of. Is there less than zero surprise like that? Yeah, that tracks. That is a JD movie.
Look, it's messy. It's a little flawed. I agree, but I love its ambition. Anyway, we're not here to review that movie.
The understatement, a little flawed. Yes.
Look, I like its ambition. Anyway, that is to say, that is the reason we're here. And part of this new venture for them, they were in a massive bidding war over the Halloween franchise. And I believe barely lost to Miramax is what
it was weird. It was like initially reported that they got it, and then like the trades were like, oops, we reported that a little too soon. It's over here now.
So, that is to say, A24, they've championed what is really, to what you were saying earlier, it's more art house cinema. That's what it is. It just happens to be a horror film, but they have many movies that constitute art house, but that fall into different genres. That's A24. And them going after Halloween is indicative of the art house thing, not the elevated thing, because look, we're equally interested in slasher movies. We're trying to get Halloween. Well, we lost that. Well, maybe we'll get Nightmare on Elm Street or whatever they go after next.
Right.
They're not against these movies. They're just trying to champion these movies that they consider artful and crafted with a different mindset than the major studio films. And there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't have to be this mutually exclusive thing.
Totally. Yeah, totally agree. Two things. One, I wish they had gotten Halloween before the last Halloween movie came out. That would have been great because I never would have had to sit through that. That would have been fantastic for me, but little too slow. And this whole people God bless, people get mad at the dumbest things. Like they get like A24 is, they're no longer going to be broke and they're no longer going to fold their doors because they went bankrupt. That's terrible. It's exactly like when you listen to a band and you listen to their first album and it's like punk rock and cool and edgy. And then it gets radio play. And then they get to a major label and now you're like, they sold out. Man, they're trying to eat. They're
trying to make money.
Why do you think they're in a band? Why do you think they're making movies and putting them out in theaters? So they make money. Yes, the art is a big part of it. Absolutely. But if you don't make any money, you can't make any art. The starving artist business plan is not a good one. It does not work out. I mean, look,
I don't know how much people know about A24, but look, Spring Breakers didn't make a lot of money.
That movie rules. God, I love that movie.
Under the Skin, not bringing in the bank.
Oh, that was my number one movie that year.
Numbers.
Yeah, it did not.
You know what I mean? Ex Machina maybe did okay, but it's not Greta Gerwig.
Yeah, it's not gangbusters. They've never really. Have they ever made a movie that made a lot of money? Hereditary, maybe.
So yes, the big one? I think their biggest film was Everything Everywhere.
Oh yeah, that was massive. Year. Sure, yeah.
So they've had some award successes. I think this really starts with Moonlight and Lady Bird. Those movies ended up doing well financially because of their awards successes. But again, Moonlight took a little while to get there. That was made for $2 million. I
was going to say, and it cost nothing.
It cost nothing. It cost $2 million. And its initial run wasn't great. They might have broke even. But when it gets nominated for Best Picture, it goes back to theaters and then garners something like $80 million.
I remember seeing that movie in the theater, and it was me and me. There was nobody there. Before the awards chatter. Yeah, absolutely right. I was like,
we could go through all of their films, and I bet you most of them I if I saw them in a theater, yeah, it was me and 3 people.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean?
100%.
Like
Except for Everything Everywhere All at Once. That one, which I saw like I think opening weekend or the weekend after that, was pretty packed. And it was just kind of immediate. And then word of mouth grew and grew. And it was I was so happy to see that. I remember seeing it thinking like, no one's gonna like this movie. Like, I love this movie, but like this is weird. Like weird AF, like no one's gonna get into this. And then everyone I talked to really enjoyed it. And I was like, oh my God, this could actually be something. I was so happy to see that movie make as much as it did.
Absolutely. And here I have the top 10 A24 movies worldwide box office.
Do all of those even break? Do those even break even when you get to 10? Are they even break?
Yeah, I mean, I need to look up their budgets because I don't have that in front of me, but I would venture that because again, A24, they're not like Beau is Afraid is on the expensive side for them. A lot of them, they don't tend to make $100 million movies, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
So I'd have to look at the budgets, but number one, as I noted, was Everything Everywhere All at Once. That was $111 million worldwide. So that one did very well for them. Number 2, Hereditary. The horror movie, Hereditary. Yeah. Number 3,
the elevated horror movie. I think.
Yeah, exactly. Which everybody hated, clearly.
Yes.
81 million. Number 3, Lady Bird. So there's Greta Gerwig. That did 80 million. Number 4 this year, Talk to Me, another horror movie. At 68 million.
Let's not even talk about that movie. Continue.
As we noted earlier, number 5 is Moonlight, which most of this is after it was nominated for Best Picture, but it garners 65 million. And then number 6 is Uncut Gems, which isn't horror, but borderline at times in terms of extension. 50 million. Number 7, Midsommar. Ari Aster there once again. At number 8, everyone's favorite Aronofsky film, The Whale, at 40 million. And then at number 9, The Witch. So there's Robert Eggers, that is 40 million. And then at number 10 is Ex Machina at 38 million.
I'm surprised that The Witch outgrossed Ex Machina. I did my part with Ex Machina. I think I saw that like 4 times in the theater.
Yeah, Ex Machina was great. And I mean, it's pretty close. It was less than $2 million.
So basically the same. Yeah, sure.
About there. So.
Yeah, there's some good movies in there, man. Like that's so I'm glad that a studio that has produced some, whether you love them or not, some thought-provoking movies. Like I refuse to think that you see The Witch and you're like, blah, that was nothing. Like there's something there, whether you like it or not. And I'm glad a studio like that is branching out and trying to get bigger and getting a bigger audience. Isn't that what we want out of our art house cinema?
Yeah.
I mean, we'll get to it later, but I mean, Scorsese is making movies with $200 million budgets.
Exactly.
And that's great.
Yeah. I mean, well, and the thing is, in the world of streaming and the type of movies that studios are making now, unless you're Christopher Nolan, unless you're Martin Scorsese, it's really hard for filmmakers to get those kinds of budgets to make these big, accessible movies.
Totally.
Where the films that A24 is championing, they don't get made unless an A24 comes along. And I agree with you. Say what you will about A24 and those type of movies, but I do find a lot of them to be thought-provoking and provocative and challenging in all of the best ways. There are so many films in their filmography that are among the best of their respective years. And again, that's where the conversation around A24 gets weird for me, because if you were to remove them from the conversation, if we remove the whole elevated thing, we would just talk about these movies as being thought-provoking and challenging and artistically crafted. But because we have to put it into some sort of category, and as you said it earlier, someone decided to coin elevated as a thing, because we don't do this for any other studio. We don't do it for any other type of movie. It's just this. And it's absolute nonsense.
Right. Yeah, and this is, of course, like everything else, this is something that should be judged in 10 years, right? When
Yeah.
we see what they do with expansion, when we see what they do with going after IPs, because you can take IPs and make great films, or you can make trash. And we're gonna find out what A24 is really about. And my money is on them still stretching ideas and going for broke and trying new and different things, because nothing is more obnoxious to me than getting rights to an IP and then just making the same thing over and over again, just because and this is especially, it happens a lot with horror, because let's be honest, people are going to see horror movies till the day they die. Like, it could be the worst movie ever. I bet that awful Exorcist movie still makes its budget. I bet it still makes money.
I want to look it up now that you're I'm going to look it up as you're talking.
I mean, it's like these things will always make money. So horror producers could just like, yeah, do whatever you want. Who cares? We're going to make our money back. Doesn't matter. Like, that's.
Yeah, absolutely. The Exorcist Believer, as it stands, worldwide, $85 million.
Jeez. I wonder how much the budget of that movie was.
Let's see if I can look that up real fast, too, as we're talking here. Let's see here. So estimated budget is $85 million. So right on par to making its money back.
Exactly, even. And I have not seen one positive review of that movie. Like, you want to talk about review proof? Like, people brought that up when you talk about comic book movies. Nah, horror movies been review proof for decades.
People will go and see horror. Absolutely.
Because what teenager doesn't want to go to the movie theater and go with their crush and get scared? Like, that is the ultimate, like, period of growth in our lives. We've all been through that. So, like, if you don't know what movie to see, let's go see the horror movie. We know what we're getting.
Absolutely. And circling that back to A24, I think it's interesting that while some of their horror films have done well, I think that's primarily because of word of mouth. They don't really market their movies
at all
a ton. And I think it's indicative of when you look at something like Pearl and X, because as I noted earlier, those were not in the top 10. I don't even think they're in. X is at 22 on the list. And Pearl is much lower on the list.
Weren't one of those or two of those, though, didn't they come out like during COVID times? Like, it's so hard to gauge.
Some of them certainly came out during that time. But like Pearl and X I bring up because there wasn't much marketing, certainly not, expansively as, let's say, Exorcist Believer, for example.
Oh, certainly not. Yeah.
But to your point, if people were aware of them, even though they fall under the A24 brand, I have no doubts that they double the numbers that they have listed here, easily.
Yep. Agreed.
People just didn't know about them. I'd be curious to see their streaming numbers, because I bet their streaming numbers are pretty good.
Yeah, I bet they are.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where I watched both X and Pearl.
Same here. So, they just don't market their movies like the studios have. They don't have the money, but that's why they're wanting to change and go after these IPs. And I'm fascinated.
No, JD, they're sellouts. See, they're selling out.
Look, it's just not you can't spend you can't spend, I don't know, $10-15 million on an art house movie that's going to make $2. And a lot of their movies fall under that, because
not all of them. Like, you can do it every once in a while. Like, you can do the one for the studio and one for me. But if every movie is losing money, like, I'm not great at math, JD. But I know
it's not going to work out. Yeah.
If I keep not making money, I'm not going to have a business. Like, that's.
Yeah. That's interesting. Like, I would love to hear A24. I don't know if they would ever say this, but Everything Everywhere All at Once, Hereditary, Lady Bird, Moonlight, those, their highest grossing movies have probably funded 20 different movies that lost money.
Totally.
Because they only cost like $4 or $5 million to make.
And there's the other thing. If we as cinephiles want to bitch and moan about the state of film and how everything is a tent pole and we're just funding these giant corporations. Don't we want a studio like A24 making a bunch of money so they can fund these smaller movies like Under the Skin? But that should be what we want. So the idea of getting mad at this is insane. It's just like, oh, so you just like to complain. That's what you're telling. You just want to complain about things. This is a good thing.
I agree. I mean, so as I'm looking at this list, just to name a few, and you might disagree, but I'm sure if you were looking at this list, you could easily name 10 films on here that you love as well. But I'm looking at something like A Ghost Story from 2017, High Life from 2018, Lock from 2014.
Fantastic.
Let's see here. First Cow from 2020. That was my favorite film of that year. The Last Black Man in San Francisco from 2019.
Yes.
Like all those movies I just mentioned, and I could
money.
They made less than $4 million.
Yeah. Hey, I gave them my $12. I don't know what to tell you, A24. I did my part. I tried.
I did my part.
I tell people to go see it, and they look at me like I'm crazy, like I just made up a movie that doesn't exist. I'm trying.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and those films, like the major studios are not making these movies. So unless they independently find the money themselves, these filmmakers and producers,
and
these movies just aren't getting made,
and they'll get buried on a streaming service somewhere, and no one will ever see
no
it.
one will ever know about it. Absolutely, and so I'm super grateful to A24 that these films exist because they're some of my favorite movies in those given years.
Yeah, every one of those movies you just mentioned was like at worst a B+ movie. At absolute worst, B+ to A+. Like that's a good run of movies. Man.
Yes, and I just mentioned a few. There's obviously a lot more on here that we could talk about, and all of those movies made less than $4 million. I'm sorry, but that's not sustainable. You can't be making all these movies and grossing less than $5 million. So the IP thing was coming. Yeah. They had to. It was the only move, unless they get super lucky and every few years they get in Everything Everywhere All at Once. But I don't know if you can rely on luck like that.
You can't depend on that. That was just a perfect moment. That really worked out, that you get these great weird directors in the Daniels, and you get a couple recognizable people and some nostalgia folks showing up, and it's weird and over the top and still fun and still moving. That a movie like that comes around like once a decade. Like that's special.
Absolutely.
So you can't wait for that. Like that's
you definitely cannot. So I have no ill will at A24 because you and I know that whatever move they make in terms of IP, whatever franchise they end up getting their hands on, hopefully it's The Exorcist if they're going to keep making movies.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Whatever they get their hands on, they'll be able to make good movies. One, they'll likely market these because it's IP. And they'll make a lot of money, and they'll take those returns and they'll invest it in the next Under the Skin, or Spring Breakers or whatever. So we're going to get the best of both worlds. They mentioned that they do want to keep making those kind of movies, but they need income in order to do that. So
movies cost money. Fine. Newsflash, like come on, guys!
Shocking. Who would have thought?
God bless.
I thought all these people were working for free. That's what Bob Iger wants.
Yeah,
I want these actors to work for free. Come on.
He would love that. What are you doing on strike? Just work for free, and then we'll AI you in the rest of the movie till the end of time. It'll be great.
Oh my gosh, that clip going around where it's digitally inserted these. I don't even know what you call them into the background of this gymnasium. I was horrified. Yes. Also, the funniest thing
it's pretty funny.
In my life.
It's pretty funny. Like, so I am
good.
of two minds about that as well. Like, I laughed my ass off when I saw that. But also, like, I've been treated like I've been crazy because I've been shouting from the rooftops about this since they like digitally put Peter Cushing in a Star Wars movie after his death. I was like, oh no. this is what's going to happen. Every actor is going to have something in their will
Yeah.
saying, this is what you can use my likeness for. And I'm going to give this person control. And because this is where they're headed, is like the dream of the studios is get actors, but never have to pay them. And they say exactly what you want them to. And it's no longer art. When that happens, it is no longer an art form, because some of the greatest performances have come out of discussions between directors and actors bringing their own perspective. But who needs that when you can have good looking AI models just do and say what you want? Like, oh God.
Or in the case of this viral clip, not
quite. We're not there.
Good.
You know, we're working on the tech, JD. Come on.
I know, we're working on the technology. Come on.
It was like if you're a video game person, it's like if you're playing a sports video game,
That's
the crowd,
exactly what I was gonna say.
You're just like, okay, well, they just didn't put any money into that part. They wanted the action.
But it was
here.
like 10 years ago crowd CGI. It's not like, even like updated to today.
Yeah, it's like MLB 98. It's like, ooh, guys, this is so not bad. Good. It was like the crowd during the pandemic when they just put the cardboard cutouts. That's
pretty much what it was.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So yes, very funny. I laughed a lot because of how bad the execution was. But yeah, the idea of it is terrifying. It's not art. And it really is scary for these actors. And the other issue with it as well, to further complicate things, is that the actors that they were CGIing in there were people of color.
Yeah.
So you're already
taking away jobs from people of color too. Like, just like, could this get worse? Yes.
Yes.
Here we go.
Yes, it can.
God damn.
I know. Not good. Not good at all. Hopefully that'll change. Anyway, for A24, I'm very much okay with this move. It's going to work out well for everybody. All right, Dave, we need to talk about coffee. Do you drink coffee?
Every day. Yes, sir.
It is a favorite of mine as well.
Just coffee and spite. That's the only thing keeping this going. That's
exactly. I think those are great qualities to have. Absolutely. Those are the two things everybody needs every single day. And that's why we love Coffee Cult, because they source specialty grade Arabica coffee from 50 countries around the world. And not only that, they only use the highest grade. They inspect every single bean that comes through that they roast. The quality is unmatched. And that's the difference, because some coffee companies that shall not be named will use lesser grade, or they'll use defects to cheapen the coffee to, make it a little bit more, I guess, affordable. But you're losing out on quality. Or some companies will use Robusta coffee beans, which admittedly do have more caffeine, but the taste is absolutely rancid. Awful. Robusta coffee beans taste like dirt. So you don't want that. And Coffee Cult is like, no, thank you. We're only going to use specialty grade Arabica coffee. And that's why the quality of their coffee is just the best. And additionally to that, they roast to order. So your coffee is not just sitting around in some warehouse getting stale and old. It's not sitting on a shelf at a grocery store waiting for someone to buy it. And who knows when it was roasted. They wait for you to order, they roast it, they ship it. It is guaranteed fresh every single time. And again, the quality just cannot be beaten. They have a Colombian IPE that I absolutely love, Dave. This is a coffee that on its own, again, you don't need to add anything to it. Just drinking it straight up, it has these potent notes of strawberry and blueberry and peach. It's like drinking a blueberry muffin for breakfast.
Nice. That sounds incredible.
Great. It's so good. It's so good. Or if you want something a little bit more robust, especially as the air is getting cooler in the northern states.
Finally.
And now maybe not so much in Florida where it's summer all the time.
Well, you've made some errors in your life. I can't help you there. And I live in Kentucky, so for me to say that's
I know.
Wow.
I do miss Lexington. But yes, in the northern states, it's getting cooler. I mentioned earlier, I was in Philly over the weekend, and it was a nice 50 degrees. Maybe even a little cooler. I loved it.
Perfect hot coffee weather, man.
It's great. Absolutely. And if you want something a little bit more robust for that chillier air, if you want something that has like these chocolate notes to them, these earthy notes, like the Sumatra they have is just perfect for this time of year. So they have all kinds of single origin and coffee blends available. Go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K. Coffeecult.com. Use our code ISF and you'll get 15% off. Again, use our code ISF and you'll get 15% off at coffeecult.com. All right, Dave, it is now time to talk about the InSession Film Store. Everyone's favorite.
Yes.
We have so many lovely t-shirts there for you to check out. Recently, we put up a Midnight Special themed t-shirt.
Of course you did.
Jeez. That it has, Michael Shannon there holding his son with the text, "I'll always worry about you. That's the deal." I didn't have an InSession Film tie to wear to Brendan's wedding. I should have bought one. However, underneath my suit, I did have my Midnight Special shirt though. So I did represent InSession Film in some way.
So the truth comes out, Brendan. He was not crying at your wedding and how emotional it was. He was thinking about Midnight Special.
Okay, I almost did, but not quite. And it wasn't Midnight Special, but I got close. I was very happy for Brendan.
Yeah, he deserves happiness. He puts up with a lot. Lord knows.
He does, absolutely. So anyway, you can get a Midnight Special themed shirt. We also have a new shirt out there for those that love La La Land and Moonlight. This is one of my favorites.
Wait, I thought you couldn't. I mean, I thought you had to choose.
Exactly.
What next, Scorsese with a cape? What are we doing? We can't.
I know, God forbid. God forbid. Everything is mutually exclusive these days.
That's right. Truly.
So I know that this is really hard for people to wrap their minds around. At any rate, we have a new t-shirt up right now that simply says, "The best thing that ever happened to La La Land is that it lost Best Picture to Moonlight," which is something we've said a lot here on the show because it's very true. The best thing that happened to La La Land is that it lost Best Picture because now everyone can be happy.
Right. And you don't have to be like, where does this rank in Best Picture? Like,
yeah,
I'm out of this conversation. We're just having a good time.
Exactly. Look, people hated La La Land because they wanted Moonlight to win.
Right. We're just teaching. We're teaching people to love jazz. It's fine. We're all having a good time.
That's it. If it wasn't for awards, no one would have cared.
Yeah.
But now that Moonlight won, people can love La La Land in peace.
Yes.
Moonlight has its award. Everyone is happy.
It's true.
So that's the spirit of that shirt. You can go and check that out. We have a Barbie themed shirt. We got a Star Wars themed shirt. We got all kinds of fun things up there. We got hashtag JD Tears if that's something you want to check out. We got all kinds of fun things up there. Women in Session, for those that listen to Women in Session. Go to InSessionFilm.com/store, or you can go directly to TeePublic. That's where we host all of our stuff at TeePublic.com/stores/InSessionFilm. Either way, you'll see all of that stuff up there. And it's not just t-shirts. You can get these designs on phone cases, stickers, magnets, mugs. If you drink coffee, if you want something for the coffee cult, we got a mug. You can get a nice little mug there. All kinds of fun things. Again, that's InSessionFilm.com/store. Go check it out. I promise you'll be looking exquisite. Okay, let's talk about Martin Scorsese. That is the topic that we are all tuning in for here. New film, Flowers of the Killer Moon, coming out this weekend. Before we get to a little bit of a retrospective here, Dave, I think it is appropriate to bring up, as of the day we are recording this, there was an article from a website that shall not be named that...
Was this the get off my lawn? Is this the...
Yeah, the get off my lawn. Like bringing up more Scorsese discourse. And in this specific article, it's essentially referring to the idea that Martin Scorsese isn't accessible anymore, that he doesn't have a mainstream draw, which is utterly ridiculous.
It's insane.
And maybe they're basing that off of, I don't know, silence, because you look at his box office numbers and I don't know, like the numbers are there.
Yeah.
Wolf of Wall Street was made less than 10 years ago, and that made, what, $450 million worldwide?
Yeah, that doesn't fit the narrative. So that movie
doesn't fit the narrative.
Exist. Yeah, no,
Oh,
not real.
And like what? We're going to talk about The Irishman maybe doing a little less than that because it was dumped on Netflix.
Because it was in 8 theaters for like 2 days.
Yeah.
Shocking.
I mean, come on.
This is an age-old thing at this point with Scorsese, is that people strangely find a way to limit him. This is one of the most diverse directors in the history of the form. If you're looking at what he's talking about, styles of filmmaking, who your lead characters are, what the stories are, all this stuff is very, very different. But then it just becomes like, oh, he's the gangster director because he made like 3 movies that were about organized crime, and it's the same thing here. Like, one of his movies didn't make money. So it's like looking at his career and be like, let's talk about Boxcar Bertha. Like, no, that's not. What are we doing? Like, this is like, it's willfully obtuse and it drives me crazy. And then on the other side of things, there are Scorsese fans who are taking the negative things he has said about comic book movies and just putting it across everything, laying this huge blanket across it and kind of, I think, misrepresenting what he's actually talking about. And if this is not film discussion on Twitter in 2023, I don't know what is. It's the perfect example where everyone just cherry picks the points that they like and then ignore fact and logic. We just get rid of that whole thing. It's nonsense. It drives me nuts.
I completely agree. And also, stop asking him about Marvel.
Yeah, serious. Well, they got to get their clicks, baby.
I know it's the media-driven clickbait nonsense is maybe more grating than the A24 news. Well, I guess I did mention that earlier. It is absolutely the most grating discourse.
Yeah, I agree. And this is coming from like a Scorsese fanboy. I love Martin Scorsese. I think he is not only our greatest living director, but desperately important to the form. Like,
I agree. Yeah.
Not even just the movies he's made, but I mean, I'm sure you guys have talked about this on your show, but like, the World Cinema Project, like how he's brought films from places that don't get press, and he has helped them out of the kindness of his heart, and to the art form, he has helped them. And in terms of older film, like literally saving the art form, and then made a movie about it. He made Hugo essentially about film preservation. Like he made a children's movie that was a comedy, which is fantastic, about film preservation. You know which kind of talent it takes to make that palatable to a general audience? That movie made money too. Like that was.
I mean, and that's the thing. Like, if we're boiling this down to silence, because that was a very personal religious film for him to make,
so good.
Or The Irishman, which was a Netflix movie. And by the way, the streaming numbers for that were still great. And I don't know if people recall writers of said article, but that the discourse around that movie was still loud. People saw that movie. People talked about it for weeks.
Yeah, we were counting the lines that women spoke.
Exactly. So, and Killers of the Flower Moon, I know Apple is taking a little bit of a different approach to its theatrical release. It's certainly going to be in theaters longer before.
You mean they're putting it out? Jeez.
Yeah, exactly. Thank God for Apple in that regard.
Truly.
But what does it say about the studio system that Netflix and Apple are having to fund him now? I don't know. Just throwing that out there.
I mean, it's just, oh God. Okay. So what it's saying is that, as always, Marty is right.
Marty is right.
There is, because of the way the system has worked, and I'm not here to talk trash about comic book movies. I've done that plenty, like kind of as a bit. There's some comic book movies I love and some that I despise. Like any genre of film, right? You're gonna have good and bad.
Just
you're
like
gonna
any
have
elevated genre,
yes,
elevated drama. Even
you're gonna have Spider-Man 2, and you're gonna have
wait, Dave. That's
Ant-Man
elevated superhero movie.
Oh God!
Be careful now.
God, you're gonna make me curse on your show. Stop it! Stop it! But what he's talking about is because there is so much of that. Wait for the word, content. There is not a lot of room in theaters for other things, right? And some of this kind of started with I remember when Star Wars came back out, and it was like they had to add theaters because that movie was going to make so much money. So literally there was no room at the inn for anything else. And that now is the expectation. So now these theaters, these studios don't even want to put movies out in the theaters because they can just keep it on their streaming service and lock it up and not have to worry about advertising, about doing any of this work for the art form. And I truly do think, and this is the film as art person in me, I think if you're ignoring a filmmaker like Scorsese, I feel bad for you. I think you're missing out on not only great movies and a great man, but someone who is searching. Someone who still at his advanced age is searching for meaning.
Which you recently noted in an interview.
Oh my God, that interview is beautiful.
So
it's literally him talking about how close he is to death and the things he hasn't figured out and the things he's still working through. Man, you brought up Silence. By the way, Silence, probably top 5 Scorsese for me.
Definitely
I think it's incredible.
For me. My hands up.
As someone who has had many issues with religion and constantly is still thinking about whether a higher power exists and what that means and what it means if the higher power doesn't, that is Scorsese searching for answers and failing. And what a beautiful thing to put in a film. This is my failure and I'm still looking. Like that, if that is not being raised, because I like Martin Scorsese, Italian American, raised Catholic, I have a lot of the same hangups that he does. So I watched that movie and I was moved to tears by that movie. I thought it was absolutely stunning. I just, so you're missing out on a lot. And to say oh, it's just another white man doing this, or it's just another mobster movie, and it's just The Irishman is not just another mobster movie. The Irishman is coming to grips with the boisterous, over-the-top nature of the other mobster movies he did and realizing
it's about legacy.
It leaves you alone and dead and having no one to care for you. That's what this crazy, fun, money, violence, sex, that's what it all leads to. It leads to literally nothing. It leads to people closing the door on you in a home. That's a beautiful thing to explore. And if you just look at it as oh, it's just De Niro doing another mobster movie with Scorsese, then man, you need to look a little bit deeper. And you could say that about some comic book movies too. There's deep meaning in some comic book movies. Honestly, some of my favorite movies of the last 10 years are the Spider-Verse movies.
Yeah.
And you know me, I'm not an animated film guy and I'm not a comic book movie guy necessarily, but those movies are beautiful and brilliant. I just purchased the new one on 4K and I'm very happy that I spent that money. So there's good to be had in all, but that's the point that he's making is we need all.
I agree.
And
I completely agree.
And the studios are not letting us have all anymore. So now they can use the excuse of well, it'll be on streaming. Okay, great. Which streaming thing? How much money do I have to pay for that? And am I even going to find it? Are you going to put it on the front page, or are you going to bury it after the first week?
Which is what they do. Yeah.
Oh, it drives me crazy.
It's absolutely insane. And that's why I'm rooting for Killers of the Flower Moon, not just because it's Scorsese, but when you look at the trajectory of this year, financially speaking, the 2 biggest movies are Barbie and Oppenheimer. IP driven movies. Barbie certainly comes from a brand, but everything about that film is original.
Totally.
And those are the two highest grossing movies. When you look at most of the IP driven movies this year, including Indiana Jones, including Mission Impossible, both those films did okay financially, but they underperformed expectations.
Totally.
Fast X underperformed. And then there's the bomb of the Flash, the biggest bomb in cinematic history.
Yeah.
Transformers doesn't do very well. Like all of this IP driven content that the studios are wanting to throw at us, people are slowly separating themselves from it.
Right.
Whereas the biggest grossing films, especially compared to expectations, are the more original content this year.
Yeah.
And hopefully Killers of the Flower Moon adds to that to yell at the studios, hey, the tide might be changing here at least a little bit.
Yeah.
And you need to give us a little bit more variety.
Right. And that's not to say that comic book properties and these other properties can't be original. Yes. They can be original, or you can be Ant-Man 3. So there are options here. By the way, maybe the ugliest movie I've ever seen, Ant-Man 3. Like just mud on the screen. Gross. And this is indicative of the lack of effort because so much money had been made on these properties. I think these studios got really confident. We can do whatever we want as long as we have the same people in it. It'll be fine. And audiences are speaking loudly that they want originality. They want something surprising and not just the same old trash stuff at the screen.
Absolutely. I completely agree. And while, yes, I do think that audiences are screaming for something different than just IP after IP, as we've been talking about. But to your point that, yes, when done well, I love a lot of these films as well. I have defended Marvel probably more than lot of other people have. But I do agree that at a certain point, they've relented on, quality because they're just trying to get out
too much TV, man.
All of this, all of these movies, and like, I love something like Eternals. I think even this year, you look at something like Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. I think that's
I dug that one actually. I do too. Yeah. There's going to be a mix, and I think this is one of the major problems with that studio is, like every other studio, it begins with greed. It used to be like, oh, we're going to do 2 movies this year. We're going to put all our efforts into these 2. Okay, now we're going to do 6 and 2 TV shows. And it's like, okay. And you can see it on the screen. You can see it in what comes out, that like they are spread thin. And not just the special effects workers who need to be treated much, much better, by the way.
Yes.
But also just the writing becomes subpar because they're rushing this stuff out and they're pushing it through and you can feel it.
Yeah. I completely agree, especially on the TV side of it. And that wasn't a piece of news that we were going to get into in this conversation. But since we are on the subject, it is funny that Marvel has completely shifted their TV format. That was another piece of news.
Now they're just making it like actual television.
Television.
They've reinvented television.
Oh my gosh. Imagine that. The 6-episode format didn't work out. Who would have thought?
We're going to have showrunners and a show. I was like, where have I heard this before? I feel like this sounds really familiar to me. I don't know why, but
wild. Absolutely wild. And that is so frustrating to me because I do think that several of them. Now, I do really love WandaVision. I think that is really great. So despite the lack of traditional formatting, that I think is still great. Season 1, of Loki, I thought was great too. But the rest of them, it did feel as if something was missing. And that is frustrating because a few of them had the potential to be great, such as Moon Knight, for example. It is a messy series, but I love the ambition of it, and
I low-key kind of like that show, actually.
I do too.
Is it good? I don't know. Does it make sense? No. It doesn't make sense. But you know what? Like, you put Oscar Isaac on the screen and I'm watching.
And
Like,
Ethan Hawke, I think, is very good.
Totally.
And yeah, they had a great dynamic. And like, you see the seeds of something there that if it had a showrunner, if it had more time to breathe and to develop,
if it had
that story,
internal logic, if it made any sense, maybe.
Then,
what,
yeah, I mean,
JD,
that could have been great.
Very radical. You're talking crazy here. Let's settle down.
Absolutely, I know. God forbid. At any rate, let's circle back to Scorsese. And you brought up The Irishman earlier, and I think you make a really great point. I think what is so fascinating about that film, because you look at his movies, and yes, there is a diverting quality to many of them. There's a spiritual quality directly or indirectly to a lot of them as well. And I think that's what's so brilliant about The Irishman, because it feels like a movie that he's been waiting to make for 30 years.
Yeah.
Because it has this tender, poignant, again, almost spiritual tendency to it, while being this epic, diverting crime movie at the same time. And it's so fascinating because it works as this somber rumination on one man's life and the consequences of his choices. But as you were talking about, it's also one of the genre and how it's defined the people involved with that film, not just Scorsese, but Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, Al Pacino. Every single one of their legacies will be tied to the crime genre. And the film functions as that reflective examination from the perspective of an elder statesman and retrospectively looking upon the work they've done over the years and serving it through this lens of sorrow. And I love how Scorsese makes that work within the context of the film for Frank, the central character there, but externally for himself and that cast.
Yes.
It's incredible how that works both ways. It's nothing short of sublime. And that is why that film, I think, is honestly top tier Scorsese. It's just everything that we've come to love about him. And it makes it's even more poignant in hindsight of that article we mentioned earlier, where he's still a man wrestling with his legacy. He's still wrestling with the time that he has left. And it makes sense that he would pour that into something like The Irishman, a film, not just stylistically. And it is interesting how he toys with the Goodfellas structure.
Totally.
Again, with the somber qualities of that movie, but also just the him wrestling with the humanity underneath all of it. It's so fascinating to me.
So here's an odd comparison. It reminds me in some ways of the first Scream.
Okay.
So Wes Craven, kind of the master of that genre already, is taking a look at the genre and also making a really good horror movie.
Yes.
So in this same way, like, he is analyzing the mobster genre and these stories that he's told, and also making a good film within said genre. And that is close to impossible to do well.
Yes.
But of course, it's Scorsese. Like, if anyone's going to pull this off, it's him. And I am a staunch defender of that movie. There was a lot of like jokey comments about it, about like, the way that De Niro walked when they tried to like make him younger. And like, some of that stuff doesn't quite work, but like, I don't know. I was so into the movie that I was able to brush past that. I was able to move past it. And it's just, and here's the thing about Scorsese. This is how much I love Marty. I have never done this, but I have invoked my editor's privilege and I'm reviewing that movie. I have not done that in the entire time I've been an editor.
That's fine. Like, you're in charge.
I'm like, everyone shut up. This one's mine. Like, there's not going to be very many Scorsese movies for me to do this. So like, this is going to be mine. And man, if you look at that man's filmography, especially if you start after Boxcar Bertha, because that's really, Mean Streets is really the beginning. After Cassavetes tells him like, hey, you just made a piece of garbage. He did not say garbage. He said a not nice word that means garbage about Boxcar Bertha. And then you get Mean Streets. And like, basically to me, after that, he made one bad movie. in all those decades. He made New York, New York. New York, New York is a bad movie. He was in debt and really, really high on cocaine throughout that entire making
Which
of that
he's
movie.
talked about. He's very much on the record for that. Yeah.
And it doesn't work. And it's, ugh. And I'm a musical guy. Yeah. I love musicals, but I watched that movie and I was like, ooh. I used to have a podcast called The Podcast Directed By, and that's when I went through all of these and watched them all. And it's intimidating to go through that man's filmography, because even the movies that didn't do well are really great. Yeah. King of Comedy is a great movie.
That's my favorite. King of Comedy is my favorite Scorsese.
And After Hours is great. All these movies are phenomenal pieces of art, pieces of film. And like, we could sit here and talk about top fives. We could talk about our favorites. And like, this is hard for me because literally you could just put them all in a hat and pick them out.
Pick one out.
And if it's not New York, New York, I'd be like, yeah, sure. That's my favorite today. Like, so like, especially because there's so many different things he plays with. I mean, you want to talk about violent movies? Age of Innocence, that's a violent movie. It may not be physically violent, but emotionally, that is one of the most violent movies I have ever seen in my life. And it is beautiful. There's about 4 or 5 of his movies that I could honestly say, like, that's a perfect movie. I mean, Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, Goodfellas, Casino, Age of Innocence, King of Comedy. Like, you just pick one. And like, man, Wolf of Wall Street, even, which is a more recent movie, Silence, like, he just is so damn incredible. And every time I watch his movies, and the thing that's crazy about it, it's like, are these art house? Many of them are, but I think all of them are pretty rewatchable.
Yeah, a lot of them
very accessible. And then you want to talk about accessible, watch Cape Fear, watch Shutter Island. These are fun genre movies that if anyone else made them, we would be like, that's his best movie. But because it's Marty, we're like, what a piece of garbage Cape Fear is. Like, because in comparison, like if you compare it to his greatest, like you're going to be like, oh, no.
It's just unfair. He's absolutely screwed himself in that regard.
Totally. Just, I mean, I'm very passionate about Marty. Yeah. Many of my favorite movies are done by him. And then honestly, it would make all my dreams come true if I could just sit down with Martin Scorsese for like 10 minutes and talk about movies. Because hear him in interviews talking about movies, and that's the stuff I love, maybe even more than his films, is how much he cares about the art form. And that's why when people take these things out of context and go after Martin Scorsese, I get this weird like protective thing, is I'm like, no, you're missing the point. If you like movies, even if all you watch is comic book movies, you don't get those movies without people like Martin Scorsese who are trying to save the art form. They don't exist. There is no opportunity for films like that without people like him.
I completely agree. And if I'm being cynical about it, and sometimes it's hard not to be, but I think most of the polarizing attributes that are thrown at Scorsese are simply born out of, as we talked about earlier, the incessant need for attention. Yeah. Clickbait, hot take culture. I need someone to give me a like. Right. And to do that, you know what? Scorsese, he sucks. He's overrated. Right. Or whatever the case may be. I think a lot of it boils down to that. And if people are being honest with themselves, that's really what this is, because you're absolutely right. They know that you're right. But instead of regurgitating for the billionth time, Taxi Driver is an all-timer. The King of Comedy is great. Raging Bull, one of the best sports movies. Goodfellas, what can you say about it that hasn't been said already? Right. So instead of saying that, you know what? I'm just going to throw it out there. Taxi Driver.
Not that great.
Overrated.
It's problematic.
It's problematic.
It's just, that's the effing
That's
point.
the whole point. It's the whole idea.
He's not a hero. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think, and I think also there are corners of quote unquote film Twitter or Film X, whatever we're calling it now, of people like me who have been kind of mean to the comic book fans. I'm not gonna lie, that's definitely something. And kind of tying it back to the whole horror community thing, there is a lack of respect for certain types of movies in these circles. And I think comic book movies definitely fall into that. But here's where I come off with the oh, we don't get the respect, we don't get this, we don't get that.
Mm-hmm.
To quote John Hamm in Mad Men, that's what the money's for.
Yeah.
You are a part of, I mean, truly, I say this with complete genuineness, an amazing thing that has happened in film that the MCU has done. If you would have told me 25 years ago that there were going to be comic book movies that were good, I mean, just end the sentence there, I would have been amazed.
Seriously, yeah.
But in order to create this connected universe and all these movies making money and doing all these things, and there are some lasting things. You want to talk about lasting impact? Black Panther has a lasting impact.
Yeah,
that is a real thing that matters in the history of film. But you don't get to make all the money and get all the kind of art house credentials. That's not how it works, right? Every once in a while you get one like that. You get a Dark Knight, you get a Titanic, you get a Lord of the Rings. But this is hyper rare. So if you are a comic book movie fan, you're listening to this getting heated, I get it. But also, you got everything you wanted.
Yeah.
You won, man.
Yeah.
You won the culture war.
Yeah.
And find me one person who doesn't know what Infinity War means. And if you told me 25, 30 years ago that normal people would know the term Infinity War or the Infinity Gauntlet or Thanos, man, you have lost your damn mind.
I know.
So this is great for you. You won. I lost. That's fine. Just let me enjoy Scorsese and stop telling me he's overrated because I'm going to get violent. He's not.
Yeah, and you make a really great point. There has to be a distinction between those that are making these bad faith arguments, which is what it is.
Yes.
Versus those that want to have genuine discourse. Because while I was mocking the bad faith arguments, I do think there's genuine conversation to be had about all of Martin Scorsese's films. If you want to have a true, honest conversation about a Raging Bull or Taxi Driver, if those films don't work for you and you have a real criticism you want to bring to the table, I'm very open to having that conversation. That's perfectly fine. I have that myself. I don't love The Wolf of Wall Street, for example, as much as everyone else does. I think the first 2 hours are immaculate. And the last hour is a regurgitation of the first 2 hours. I just think it gets a little redundant. And so that's my criticism. I still really like that movie, but I'm bringing an honest opinion to, I'm not just harping on that movie for a hot take.
Sure. I'd argue that Marty would love that. He would love that discussion.
Yes, I agree.
One of the greatest things about him that you see in interviews is he doesn't see himself as infallible.
Absolutely.
He will pick apart his own movies all day.
He would.
Yeah.
Honestly, I absolutely. Or another one, and this is kind of funny because Silence is a top 5 Martin Scorsese movie for me. So let me put that on the table to begin with here. I think it is absolutely masterful. I will say, though, the only thing that keeps me from maybe having it as my favorite, I think the last 20 minutes is a little deflating because it spills everything out for you. For a film that was remarkably subtle, maybe too subtle for a lot of people, very methodical. The last 20 minutes, here's everything the movie was about. And it tells you everything. And that I didn't love. But again, that's an honest conversation I'm bringing to that film. I love it. I love it. So I do want to make a distinction because we do joke and mock the absurdity of the discourse. But for anyone out there listening, if you want to have a true conversation about Goodfellas or Taxi Driver or Raging Bull or whatever, I'm okay with that.
Totally.
Obviously, we're making fun of those that are just,
are doing this in bad faith. There's absolutely, this is not an objective art form. And that's the beautiful thing about it, is that I can watch the same movie you do and have a wildly different experience and reading of it. And neither one of us is right, except me. And neither one of us is wrong. I mean, I think truly that is the beautiful thing about it. Like, and you look at Scorsese's filmography and, I think you brought up an important distinction of best versus favorite. And they're very different. Like, I think, one of my favorites might be Bringing Out the Dead.
Okay, yeah.
And I think if that gets released in any other year but 1999,
all years,
oh my God, then we think about that in a much different way. And what if Gangs of New York never had Harvey putting his dirty, gross paws all over that movie and ruining it? Maybe it's a different movie. I don't know that Cameron Diaz would ever be good in it, but the there are, and then, in terms of greatness, like is Kundun a rewatchable movie? No. Is it a beautiful piece of celluloid? Yes.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Like, I don't know. That is the one that I would probably have the hardest time coming back to and rewatching. It's a little like homework. But it's like, so many of his movies like are just so incredibly rewatchable and funny. There's not very many art house filmmakers like Scorsese that can make these beautiful, intense dramas like Silence and make After Hours. After Hours is hilarious. It's over the top. And, I was listening to another podcast. They're talking about like what other director can you mention that in like 3 or 4 different decades has like the perfect New York movie? Like that's, he really like hits it and gets it and understands that lived experience like nobody else like really does. So he's the greatest.
Absolutely. Or the way he's able to tell stories in such a distinct way. And obviously you can think of something like Goodfellas and how he tells that almost like a documentary. And I know he's somewhat on the record of that before, of how he wanted that to feel like it was this kinetic stage documentary. And it comes through in the voiceover. It's like we're watching the movie with Henry, which is fascinating when you consider how often Scorsese uses pauses. It's like Henry is pausing the movie to further comment on his life. And it gives the film this remarkable authenticity. And Scorsese uses that tension and realism to make the film all the more visceral. And that's such a Scorsese thing to do. And he makes that film so diverting and fun and energetic. But to something we said earlier, it's how he humanizes his characters inside of that. He brings something artistic and thoughtful to these movies that are often really fun, or in a very different vein than something like that. The way he reinvents the story of Christ and The Last Temptation of Christ. Very different, polarizing for sure, arguably offensive to some.
Rules.
But I love its ambition. Like, I love how he's trying to think about it in a different way than
I will say
might be accustomed to.
That is not where I would have people start.
No, I would not start like with that film.
It is wildly challenging.
It is very challenging.
For sure. And I mean, but that is the great thing about him, that he can make a movie like that. And like right before that, he made The Color of Money.
Yeah. Yeah, like those 3 films are back to back to back, right? The Color of Money, which is awesome. Temptation of Christ, very different. Straight to Goodfellas.
Yeah. Like
amazing.
What that is, and they're not far apart. It's 86, 88, 90.
Yeah.
Like not only back to back, but there wasn't like a huge gap where he's like, let me really think about how I'm going to do this. He's like, well, I'm high on Coke. Let's go. Let's do the next thing. Like, God bless him. Like, I love it. Like,
I mean, and then from Goodfellas to Cape Fear, and even Cape Fear is a little different. And then to The Age of Innocence, like a historical romance drama. Like,
yes.
Amazing.
Oh, totally. And I also like that he is, among other things that he's constantly exploring. We talked about like kind of his age and faith. He's also exploring his relationships with women, which, like, let's be real, have not been super great. I mean, he's been married 3 or 4 times. Like, it's been pretty awful breakups. And, you know, and if you
which
look at
recently came to light, right? Because his daughter just had a video that went viral at TikTok, and she's rather young.
Yeah.
And that threw some people
like,
for a loop because they didn't know. They didn't know, like, his recent wife had her when she was 55 years old.
Yep.
So yeah, to your point, like, I don't know if people, I think that threw a lot of people off. They didn't know that.
Totally. And, you know, it makes me think of the story I heard about Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, which I actually just recently rewatched. And there's a story that Ellen Burstyn tells that she basically asks him, like, do you think you understand women? And he said, no, but I'm willing, I want to learn. I'm willing to listen. And what a beautiful way for him, right after Mean Streets, one of the most masculine, maybe toxically masculine movies ever made.
Purposefully in some ways.
Yes, for sure. And then to go to this and to come in, not being like, I'm the man. I know what's up. I just made this movie. It's amazing. Everybody loves it. I'm going to do big things. Instead, he's like, man, I don't know what it's like to be a single mom on the road. You tell me what you would be experiencing here, to the point that there's a scene in that movie where she's talking about how she was taught to kiss. Her brother told her, this is what you do. And then they saw a movie and it was very different. He was like, well, maybe it's like this. That's a real Ellen Burstyn story.
Yeah.
That's her brother.
Yeah.
So she took that and kind of brought it into the movie, and he was willing to listen. And what more could you want from an ally to any movement than saying, man, I don't know anything. You tell me what it's like.
Yeah. And that's fascinating as well when you funnel it through the prism of masculinity and how that, I guess, rubs up against women. And I say that specifically because that experience, I do think, had a big impact on his, we'll say, next three movies. We'll remove New York for the moment, but his next three, aside from that one, are Taxi Driver, Raging Bull, and The King of Comedy, which all are these commentaries on masculinity and psychology in one way or another. Taxi Driver especially it deals with women directly.
Yeah. And none of them are real great for masculinity.
No.
None of them are like,
no, but it's to that conversation, it feels like it's Scorsese took that experience and wanted to explore that further, obviously from the male perspective and how challenging and problematic it is for a lot of people. And obviously it's funneled through a lot of other different arms that he's working with in that film, but
totally. And the other thing about hearing people talk about Scorsese is it makes me realize that media literacy is truly at an all-time low. Because there's a lot of, well, he's the protagonist, so he's a hero. No. I'm trying to think of any of his movies where the protagonist is actually a hero. Most of them you're looking at, like,
I don't know if there's one.
Maybe Cape Fear, if you say the protagonist is the head of the family, like
Shutter Island, maybe. I'm trying to remember how that ends.
Yeah, I mean, he's locked in an asylum, so he's got his own struggles. Like, it's
That's true.
So just because someone is the character we're following doesn't mean they're a good person. You brought up Wolf of Wall Street, and I was stunned by the reaction to that movie, because there's a lot of reaction of people saying, well, I think he's saying that Jordan is right. And I was like, I know I just got done saying that, like, there's, no matter what you get out of a movie, neither one of us is right, but I'm right. You're wrong. Like, he hates
not endorsing
Jordan at all.
Okay.
He hates Jordan Belfort like the rest of us do. He takes great pains, especially, as you mentioned, in that last hour, to make it crystal clear that this is not a good person. Just because he's funny and charming and Leo is hot doesn't mean that he's a good person. Are you crazy? Like, I remember just being flabbergasted by this reading of the movie, and I was like, no, you're I hate to say this, but you're wrong about this.
I mean, there are two that come to mind. Hugo, I think, falls into that.
Yes,
but that's a children's movie, as you mentioned earlier.
And obviously The Aviator, right? I mean, Howard Hughes, good dude, right?
Yeah, exactly. Everyone knows that. That's obvious. Well, the other one I was going to say was Silence, because, and it gets into the spiritual realm of Scorsese that I love. I love this about Marty, but you look at the Rodriguez character in that film, played by Andrew Garfield.
And his best performance, by the way.
He's so good. And the thing with Sebastio is that he is well-intentioned. When he goes on this trip, he's not, it's not coming from an ill-spirited place, which, as you're talking about with so many of us other characters, they're very aware of the violence that they're demonstrating, or even if they're not, in the case of something like Taxi Driver or The King of Comedy, those characters might not be fully aware, but obviously you get into it and they're doing some very disturbing things.
Totally.
Rodriguez he just wants to love people, and he wants to explore faith, and he wants to spread this message that he just sees as genuine and pure. Mm-hmm. And that gets tested. Like, that faith gets tested when violence and this upheaval comes his way. And so, like, I think there's an argument to be made that, it's coming from a good place, and then ultimately his faith just kind of gets upended a little bit. Yeah. And so you do kind of empathize with that struggle, as it's something that a lot of us do experience. So
totally.
I think you could argue Rodriguez, but it's still very different though than your traditional hero.
Totally. And I think, honestly, like, one of the most memorable things about that film to me is, it's something we don't think about often. If you're a person of faith, great. But would you be a person of faith in the most dire circumstances, under the threat of torture, death, your friends being destroyed? Like, how much do you believe? And does your God expect that? Or would your God want you to save your own life because he or she or they created it and they value it? So there's a lot of ways you can go with that. And it's like, is stepping on that plate really the worst thing? Or is it, saving your own life? Like, there's a lot there. And it's a movie that I almost wish wasn't so long, because I constantly want to rewatch it. And then I'm like, oh boy, this is okay. I gotta get comfy. And that's a movie that has a very special place in my heart, because it's when I realized that I watched too many movies. I was in grad school, and I was traveling to go to an interview in San Diego. And what did I do? Did I see San Diego? Did I go to the beach? No, I went to the closest theater because it was opening that weekend. And I sat for 3 hours with Martin Scorsese and his treatise on faith. Well, that's the kind of person I am. That's how much I love you, Marty.
I love that. And it's so funny that you say that, because at the top of the show, I mentioned that I was in Philly to see Brendan's wedding, which took place on Saturday this last weekend, but I got there Friday morning. I had all day Friday to figure out what I wanted to do. I've never been to Philadelphia. Should I go downtown, see the history of the city, maybe go to the Rocky Steps? Lots to do in Philly. I've never been there before. But no, the first thing I did is I hopped on my AMC app and like, is there a theater nearby? And is there anything that I need to see?
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
And there wasn't anything they weren't playing anything that I either hadn't seen, or I had to wait on the Taylor Swift thing. I was not seeing that opening weekend.
Yeah, I don't want that opening weekend. I'm surprised we didn't talk about that. That's the real big news. Taylor Swift saves movies.
Saves movies, yeah. Cinemas saved forever.
Yeah, I'm sure they're all going to come back
to
see
you, Taylor.
The next A24 movie. I'm sure they
exactly. But anyway, I bring that up to say I very much can relate. I almost did the same thing, and I would have if
something had actually caught your eye.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just briefly, the Taylor Swift thing, like, I just want to say, like, originally I was like, oh God, it's just going to push all these movies out. But then, like, softy that I am, I was at the theater, I was seeing Dumb Money. I ended up seeing that late. And I saw like all these dads with their daughters who they probably couldn't afford to take them to the tour because it's like $1 billion for a ticket.
Yeah.
And they got to share that with their kid. And that,
that is
man,
pretty cool.
I mean, that's pretty cool. Dang it. Like, I wanted to hate on it, but I was like, that's really excellent that is happening. People who can't afford that get to have that bonding moment with their parent. That's pretty cool.
Absolutely. And look, I'm all for people going to the cinema and having the time of their lives. And if that's how they have to experience it, then by all means.
I mean, I'm not going to be there with them singing and dancing in the aisles. That sounds like hell
I won't
to
be
me,
there either unless my wife needs me to take her, which we've talked about, and that might happen. But look, people are going to the theaters and having fun. Yeah. But yeah, no, that is a great point. And Taylor is once again making history.
That's right.
The highest grossing concert documentary of all time.
I mean,
Shocking.
I don't know if it's going to be good to stop making sense, but I hope that people are enjoying themselves.
Well, and it's so funny you say that because the theater I was looking at that I was maybe going to go to, Stop Making Sense was playing at the same time as the Taylor Swift movie. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is it with concert docs?
That's beautiful.
Stop Making Sense is great.
Love it. Good double bill there. Basically the same kind of music, right? I mean,
same thing, same energy. Anyway, Scorsese, great director. That's the moral.
Hot take. Yes.
Hot take.
Pretty good, that Martin Scorsese.
Good at his job.
Not bad.
I guess as we wind down here, you somewhat joked earlier that doing a Scorsese ranking is almost futile. However, do you have a top 10 that you want to share?
I know you said it's futile, but do it anyway. Look, that's what the people do. That's what they want. They want to hear, what is your top 10 Scorsese? You know what? Hold on one second, because I'm pretty sure that I probably have a letterbox list of just that. So give me 1 moment.
I'll give mine while you pull yours up.
Perfect.
I do have mine here. So at number 10 for me is The Wolf of Wall Street.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, I mentioned earlier that I don't love the third hour, but I still think it's a great movie. At number 9 is Hugo. Love me some Hugo. Number 8, Mean Streets. 7, Raging Bull. 6, Casino. And number 5, Silence. And number 4, I have Goodfellas. 3, The Irishman. And then 2 and 1 are pretty interchangeable, but for the sake of the exercise, at number 2, I have Taxi Driver. And at number 1, The King of Comedy is my favorite Scorsese as it stands currently.
That's pretty good. I don't have a list, but let me see. I think...
Let's see, you pulled 10 out of a hat.
I think Raging Bull is one of the best movies ever made.
Okay.
I think it's perfect. I think it's hard to watch. And then, obviously, like I said, these orders are going to change. I'm not the guy who thinks Casino is better than Goodfellas. I know there's a fair amount of that discussion. But I think
I'm not quite there either.
Yeah, I'm not quite there. I think Goodfellas, Taxi Driver. Let's see. I'll say Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore.
Okay. Yes.
After Hours, King of Comedy, Silence, Mean Streets, and then probably Bringing Out the Dead.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So, and like I said, you asked me tomorrow, list totally different.
Very different. Yeah, no, I heard it.
He's number one.
Yeah. No, he's definitely one of those filmmakers that your list will change depending on what movie of his you recently watched.
Totally. 100% true.
Yeah. And I'm absolutely dying to see where Killers of the Flower Moon falls in all of this as well.
Oh yeah. I am so hyped for that, man. I can't even tell you. I am going to lose sleep to watch this movie. I wake up every morning at 5:30 in the morning, and I'm going to see that movie at 7:00 at night.
Hell yeah.
So I'll be home at like between 11 and midnight and have to wake up in like 4.5 or 5 hours, but it's worth it. My wife thinks I'm insane. And she's probably right. And she was like, are you gonna, I mean, I kind of want to see it. I'm like, oh, I'll probably want to see it again. She's like, it's like 4 hours long. I was like, yeah, my favorite movie is Lawrence of Arabia. Length is not an issue.
Yeah. I'm not. Yeah. Oppenheimer is the best film of the year and has almost cracked $1 billion. And that's 3 hours.
Yeah.
On the dot. So
it's really good. I think didn't he say it was like 3 hours and 9 seconds or something? Something came out.
It's
I was like,
very close to being almost perfect. Yeah.
Oh, so good.
No, yeah, I'm with you. I have a similar-ish problem in the sense that because I have 2 kids, I can't go to the theaters until after 9 o'clock. So I will likely end up going to like a 10 o'clock showing, which means I will get out of the cinema at 1:30 in the morning. So won't get much sleep the next day.
Yeah, but the sacrifices we make for Marty, God bless him.
We will do it. Absolutely. Well, thanks, Dave, for joining me. This was a ton of fun, man. I loved having you here on the show.
Yeah, it was a really good time. I mean, granted, you roped me in, but like, we're going to talk about Scorsese. And then you're like, okay, let's talk about elevated horror. And I was like, God, I feel like I got the like rope-a-dope, just fooled me into that. But,
Gotcha.
But,
yeah.
But at least about half the show was about Marty, and he deserves that attention for sure. I had a great time.
Absolutely. Glad to hear it. Next time we'll spend more time getting into animated film and elevated superhero movies.
Yeah, it'll be great. I'll talk about nothing but The Secret of Nim, the greatest animated film of all time.
There you go. All right. Well, appreciate you being here. This really was a lot of fun. I did very much enjoy this. Brendan will be back next week, but Dave will be filling in. I will figure out another hook, and when Brendan is out, we'll get Dave back. But yeah, this was
to
really
be real,
great.
To be real, JD knows I'm in love with the sound of my own voice, so he's like, "You want to be on a podcast?"
That's
and
really
I'm like,
what
yes,
it is.
Yes, I do. The people need to hear me. Yes,
the people need it. Absolutely. Speaking of Scorsese, we will have a podcast review of Killers of the Flower Moon coming soon as well, so be on the lookout for that. Brendan and I will have a podcast review of the Wes Anderson Roald Dahl short films as well. So that'll be coming down the pipeline here. I'm also working on scheduling, but I'm hoping to have a review for the Netflix film Fair Play. I don't know if you've seen that one yet.
Not yet, but definitely on my list to watch for sure.
Yeah, and there's a new William Friedkin out. We got to talk about it.
Yeah,
so we're figuring out scheduling
his last
for that.
film. So sad, but glad we get at least one more view.
Yes, yeah. And spoiler alert, I did enjoy it. So we'll talk about that soon as well. Women in Session, the latest episode of that is up. They talk about the great David Lean. Some fun debate. Funny enough on that episode. It was really fantastic, though. Definitely urge people to go and check that out. As we wind down here, I do want to say a thank you to all of our patrons. Thank you for your support. If you want to support us on Patreon, that's patreon.com/InSessionFilm. Really do appreciate everyone that wants to help out the show there. Be sure to hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, whatever else is out there. YouTube, obviously, if you're watching us here on YouTube, be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, all that fun jazz. If you want to give us any feedback in email form, you can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Leave us reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. It really helps us out. And it gets the word out there for us. So with all of that said, I think that'll be it. Dave, do you have any final thoughts on anything before we get out of here for this episode?
Just Scorsese's the best, and he's my favorite human. He's just fantastic. And if you want more of these opinions, you can sadly find me back on Twitter at DarnThatDave.
Yes.
And also
on social.
Yeah,
yes.
For sure. I'm trying to rebuild all the people I used to see on there, and I don't know where they are, if they're still there, but I'm there. So please help me. And also read all the stuff at InSessionFilm.com. I edit all of it. So really, it's all mine. So read that. There's a lot of good stuff on there. You mentioned the Roald Dahl shorts. We have a review up from our buddy Zach. It's a really great review. So check out all the good work that we do there as well.
Yeah, really do appreciate your work there. Dave does a lot. He does a lot. As he noted, he edits all of the pieces. So please go and check out all that stuff, InSessionFilm.com. Really do appreciate your work there. And as he noted earlier, he's going to be writing the review for Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be terrible.
F for fantastic.
Yeah, there it is. Very good.
F for flowers in the moon.
Stop. Nope. You had already done it.
I went too far. I definitely ruined the bit. I know. I apologize. All right. Anyway, with all of that said, last note for me, it is Disney celebrating 100 years. I'm going to be at Disney World this weekend. So that's where I'll be celebrating 100 years.
Are they celebrating it by paying their actors?
That's what I was going to say. I hope they celebrate 100 by, giving their actors what they're worth. Let's just do that.
Truly.
That'd be a fun way to celebrate.
And stop being creepy with AI, Bob Iger.
Yes.
God bless.
God, that was so bad. So funny, but so bad. Anyway, thanks, Dave, for being here. Really do appreciate you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Marty, he's just the best. I love him.